Hi everyone, I'm Sam, the stream coordinator. If you aren't familiar, welcome to our January virtual workshop. If you aren't familiar with Rock Game Dev, or this is your first time tuning in, thanks so much for joining us. What we're going to do today is our Rob, what is your official role? What should I call you?
Director?
The
Rock Game Dev?
director of Rock Game Dev, Rob Mostyn, has released multiple EP game soundtracks and albums of music under his moniker bclikesyou, much of it utilizing LSDj. So he's going to be offering us a beginner-friendly and no music skills necessary workshop in using LSDj. If you haven't already, you can download LSDj from the Facebook event, which I'm going to drop the link to in chat right now. You can check that out there. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Rob to introduce us and get us rolling.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam. Appreciate all the work going into coordinating and putting everything together for this workshop. I'm really excited to do an LSDj workshop. And thanks to Noah for handling the Twitch coordinating. So yeah, as Sam mentioned, if you want to follow along, I'll be going through some slides here for a bit. So that'll give you time to download LSDj. You would have to, if you're going to run it on a PC, you would have to download an emulator as well, a GameBoy Advance emulator. I use, I think it's Visual Boy Advance to run the ROM. And then I would recommend grabbing a gamepad if you have one. It's a little easier to use LSDj with a gamepad than keyboard. So if you want to follow along, grab those things, set it up. In the meantime, I'm going to be walking through some slides here. So the title of this workshop is Writing Chiptunes with Little Sound DJ, also known as LSDj. A little bit about me. Again, my name's Rob, but I go by bclikesyou online across all my social media platforms. But that name was originally used when I started releasing music way back in 2002. So back then, I had been writing and playing music, but more traditional. I was playing drums, that sort of thing. And then I started writing electronic music in 2002 using a program called Reason, Propeller Heads Reason, now called Reason Studios. Really cool synthesizer program. I still use it to this day. But I started to explore electronic music and ultimately was trying to get a video game sound way back then, but not really, not having the knowledge that I do now or knowing what I was doing, just kind of like, throwing things at the wall and seeing if they stuck. But then in 2010, I was made aware of LSDj and essentially the chiptune community, and that there were actually these programs to write chiptunes utilizing the old hardware. So from there, I started writing my own music, started composing soundtracks, and to date, I've released multiple soundtracks, albums, and EPs or extended plays utilizing LSDj. So LSDj itself is specific to the Game Boy. I'll talk a little bit more about it, but there are other ones for other platforms. A band I was in called Revenge Years, we wrote music on the Nintendo, the NES, using a program called Famitracker. Still something you can use today. Again, that one's, I think, actually native to PC, if I remember correctly, and then you export like files that actually play on a Nintendo. Where LSDj, you actually do use it on the Game Boy on the actual console itself. So a little overview of chiptunes. So chiptune music, and I'm giving a real brief explanation here, is a way of creating music that utilizes retro consoles, arcade machines, and computers by basically using their built-in sound chips to create music. So, back before we could have MP3s and WAV files and all those sorts of things, back before we had the memory to have those on a game cart, things like the Game Boy, the Nintendo, the Sega actually had a dedicated sound chip on the motherboard for creating the sound. So it was basically fed code, and that code would then play the music. It's basically kind of like a synthesizer chip. I think actually the Sega, I don't know the name of it, but the Sega used a Yamaha sound chip from a Yamaha keyboard. I think I'm getting that right. So there's actually, potentially this Yamaha keyboard that you could play essentially what were Sega sounds on, or sounds you would be familiar with due to Sega. So chiptunes is often used as a genre describer, like, oh, that's chiptunes music. But I think of it a little bit more as a medium. Think of chiptunes more as the instrument that you're writing music with rather than the genre itself. It does flavor the music heavily, but that said, you're seeing more and more chiptunes, and this has been true for many years now. You're seeing more and more chiptune style music being kind of like a side instrument. It's not the whole song, it's not the whole sound, but it's an additional instrument in the mix. So I like to think of it a little bit more as a medium, more of an instrument, a style of writing music rather than the genre itself. There's large appeal for chiptunes due to its nostalgic sound. It's real easy, and you'll see today with LSDj, it's real easy to get that nostalgia sound, especially if you grew up with the Game Boy. It's easy to get that sound pretty quickly and easily. So there's large appeal due to that, and also it has very strict limitations. This is a sound chip. This is hardware from the late 80s. Memory then was what, bytes and kilobytes. So it's very strict in its limitations, and to me, that's actually a benefit and actually a large appeal to for LSDj to me. And I'll talk a little bit about that in here, about why. But moving on, Little Sound DJ, or LSDj, it was developed by Johan Kolinski starting in 2000. I think they are on version, 8 point something now. And it's funny, I downloaded the ROM for this workshop because I'm running it on my PC. But the version I've been using on my Game Boy has to be 8 years old, and there's all these new updates on LSDj, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know what some of these are, but I quickly looked through the manual, and they all make sense, and they're really cool things to have. But what LSDj is a music sequencer that utilizes the sound chip built on the Game Boy motherboard. Sometimes you'll see people refer to the original Game Boy as DMG. If you have one and you flip it over and look at the model number, it'll say DMG -01. So when people say DMG, sometimes you'll see that thrown around chiptune forums, Twitter, that sort of thing. That's what they're referring to, that specific model of Game Boy, the brick, as some people call it. Game Boy Color, Game Boy Pocket, the Advance, they all have their own things. I think the Game Boy Advance SP model is AGS, so sometimes I see people throw that around. But yeah, if you want to run LSDj, there's a couple ways to go about it. The way I started was utilizing I was using a Game Boy Advance SP and a Game Boy USB card. So kind of like the one in this photo here. You can get these from retail stores online. They are basically a Game Boy cart that has a little USB port on it. And you plug it into your computer and you can drop a Game Boy ROM on it. And that lets you install LSDj on it. You pop it in your Game Boy and it just loads up like a game. So then you're essentially creating music on the Game Boy. To any passerby, it looks like you're playing video games, but you're actually creating music. I used the Game Boy Advance because that's what I had at the time. Plus, it had the SP had a backlit screen, rechargeable battery. It made it a little bit easier to use. But you can use the original Game Boy, Game Boy Color. The SP is recommended over the original Game Boy Advance, the square horizontal one. Basically, I think because of the button layout was the issue some people had. Some of the real purists highly recommend the original Game Boy DMG because it actually had the sound chip. You get a little bit richer sounds, whereas the Game Boy Advance SP is emulating a Game Boy, so it doesn't actually have the sound chip. But whatever you have, whatever you want to use, that's the recommended way, whatever you're comfortable with. Or like I'm going to do tonight, you run it via an emulator on your computer, a Game Boy Color emulator, anything that can run a .gb file. And that's what I'm doing tonight, so you get to see how that works. Good way to start, see if you enjoy it, and then maybe shell out the money for a Game Boy cart or USB cart and then a Game Boy, that sort of thing. And again, I recommend you use a gamepad. LSDj uses a lot of button combinations, so all that's available to you is the D-pad, select, start, and B&A, and you have to do a lot of moving around and navigating and editing. So there's a lot of button combinations. If you've played video games, you should be familiar with button combinations, obviously, and it's set up well for that. And the developer was smart in doing that. But to me, it's always made it a little trickier using a keyboard and trying to do button combinations where I don't even have to look at the gamepad. I don't even have to look at the Game Boy buttons itself. So that's one recommendation I have. And then the last slide I have before we hop over into LSDj itself are just some guiding thoughts. As Sam mentioned, I'm trying to aim this workshop for complete beginners, including anybody who doesn't have any music theory knowledge, any previous composition or music writing experience, any instrument experience. LSDj is kind of nice in that way that it's friendly to beginners, especially if you've messed around with any sort of coding or just like playing games, because you are using that sort of platform, a game console platform, but you're writing music. So it is friendly in that way. And I've known a few people who didn't know how to write music, or this was their first step into writing music. And it's very friendly in that way. I might mention a few things about music theory that's more of a nod or more of a like, hey, if you do have music theory, you might recognize this as such and such. If it goes over your head, totally cool. Don't worry about it. It might make sense later on as you do more exploration. And to that note, experimentation is key here. A lot of the things I think that are cool that I've done in LSDj were a complete mistake. And sometimes when I go back and look at files, I'm like, what was I doing here? I don't even know how I did this. It was totally through experimentation. Just trying different sounds, different values, seeing how they sounded, and then landing on something cool. And then I mentioned constraints. I think those are very liberating in the creative process. You'll see that the Game Boy only has 4 what are called channels, 4 channels of music. That is, in modern music writing, that is considered not enough. Typically people want multiple channels of music. This one for guitar, this one for drums, this one for vocals. Only getting 4 on the Game Boy, and actually 3 because one of them just makes white noise. Actually only getting 3 channels of music. You have to be very creative and very experimental with what you're doing to get this full rich sound that people get with LSDj. And it's possible. There's like sounds just from one Game Boy that are just so big, and some of them you'll recognize from games. But again, I consider constraints liberating. It forces you to just focus on the writing and on experimentation rather than piling on and just having this huge junk pile of too many things that probably don't sound good together. And the last thing, make bad music. I have a ton of bad music that I haven't released, or the music that I think is bad. That's the best way to just write or eventually get close to good music, or music you think's good. Again, this is subjective, but just make a ton of stuff, and don't be afraid of it being bad, because that's the only way you get closer to sort of better or sort of good. There's an Adventure Time quote in there somewhere, but I apply this to games too. Just make stuff that you think is bad or you don't like, and just keep iterating on it. And especially if you have no previous experience with music, just keep hacking away at it, and you'll figure it out, and you'll land in some pretty cool places. So that's it for my slides. At this point, I am gonna quickly stop my current stream and switch over to the Game Boy version. So I'm going to stop here, start this one up. All right, we're live there. So at this point, we should be looking at the song screen of LSDj. I'm gonna pull up my notes here too to make sure I'm staying on track. I want to try and keep things as linear as possible because it's easy for me to jump all around with the LSDj stuff. So when you first load up LSDj, this is what you should see. Quick note here too. I mentioned I'm using the emulator I'm using is Visual Boy Advance. It supports all the way up to Advance. So it's treating this like a Game Boy Color cart. So if you pop this into, if you load this into a strictly Game Boy emulator, or if you were to load it into a physical Game Boy, you wouldn't get the colors and stuff. Using it as a Game Boy Color ROM gives you some more palette options, which I'll showcase in a second here. So it might look different palette-wise, but other than that, it should look pretty similar. And again, I'm thinking I'm using the most recent version, which is 8 point something, but going pretty far back, all of this should apply. Some of the changes are pretty minute or advanced that we won't get to today. So this is the first thing you should see. And this is the song screen. So this is where you will do the essential layout of your song. So the first thing to mention here is, and it was in one of my slides, and that is that LSDj is what's called a tracker. So that means typically in music programs, when you hit play, it moves from left to right, almost like reading a book. You almost have something called a piano roll. You see notes, moves left to right. A tracker moves vertically. So we can see all the way to the left, it says 0, 0. And then it increases in value as it goes down. When you start the song, it will start at the very top and then play down. So that's something to remember throughout this. Everything goes from top to bottom, starts at the top, goes to the bottom when it's playing. The other thing to point out here, and I mentioned, is that there are 4 channels. So you can see little abbreviations of them above each channel. The first 2 are called the pulse channels. These are the sounds that you'll probably recognize the quickest. It's really easy to get a pretty good sound in pulse. That said, pulse channel isn't, I don't want to say it's limited, but it doesn't have as much variety as the wave channel, which is the third one. But you get 2 of them. The first one has 1 extra feature compared to the second, but we won't touch that today because it's a little advanced. For now, just understand that these 2 channels, Pulse 1 and Pulse 2, represented by the PU1, PU2, are pulse, and they're pretty much identical. Then the third one is the wave channel. This is probably the beast of Game Boy. This channel has some really cool sounds, some really cool abilities. That said, it is a little bit more complex. And for today's workshop, I'll be doing a pretty basic bass sound in it. But near the end of the workshop, assuming I don't go over time, I have an advanced sound I'll showcase just to show what it's capable of. This is the channel that I often refer to as like complete witchcraft. So many of the cool sounds I've stumbled upon are on this channel, and I don't know how I got there, and they sound terrifying and incredible, and I love them. And like I said, I'll showcase one of them. Really cool channel. I'm still learning how to use it after 10 years, but super fun stuff here. And the last one is noise. And again, in the upper right, I'll point out UI things as we kind of go along here. In the upper right, you can see it has a little abbreviations for what channel you currently have selected. So the noise channel is a white noise generator. For white noise, think of like TV static, that sort of thing. This channel is mostly, well, at least I use it mostly for some certain percussion sounds. Snare drums, cymbals, explosions are good for this, glitchy sounds. That said, it's hard or difficult to get some pretty good melodic sounds from this. Some people have done it, but typically when you want more melodic sounds, you're looking at the pulse and wave channels. So this is why I mentioned that Game Boy kind of only has 3 channels for melodies. Most people I've seen, use channel or noise channel for like kind of filler background static sound, or again, percussion sounds, which is kind of how I'll approach it today. So jumping into it, and just for reference, I am using a little like USB Nintendo controller. Um, same buttons as the Game Boy, right? So I'm just trying to stick to that for simplicity's sake. So utilizing, actually, I'll go over the button combinations here for a bit, so navigation's a little bit familiar. So the D-pad just moves this cursor around. That's primarily what it does for LSDj. Pretty much all the screens that will be on, it will be moving this cursor around. So that's the D-pad. If you were to hold select and press on the D-pad, that's how you navigate between screens. So there's a couple parts to this. If you look in the bottom right, there is a little legend of letters. So right now we're on the song screen. You can see it's in the upper left-hand corner. It says song. And then if you look in the bottom right, the S is highlighted. So that's one way to keep track of where you are. LSDj organizes by different screens. So if you ever get lost, which does happen, it still happens to me, just look in the bottom right, and that's how you kind of like identify where you are. But again, you want to hold select and press the D-pad to navigate. So right now, if you hold select and hit right, you'll get a little notification that says tap A to add chain. We're not going to do that yet, but just know that that's how you would move to the chain screen. And I'll describe that in a minute here. If you hit select and press up, we go to the project screen. So this is where you save your song file. This is where you set the tempo, do some other things that are a little bit more advanced that I won't touch on. This is where you go for the help section. So at any point, if you're like, oh, what was that? What's the button combination for this thing? If you go up to help, press A to select that, you'll get a whole bunch of options here. It's basically the help menu. And for this, A selects, B cancels and backs out, which is pretty common button use. So we're in the project screen again. You can always look at the bottom right or look at the top left to see where you are. For now, let's keep the tempo. Actually, let's drop the tempo. So to adjust the tempo, you probably notice if you hit left or right, nothing really happens. If you hit up and down, you're navigating. So to adjust the tempo, you're going to hold the A button down and press left and right. And you see we can increment or lower this value. And right now we're doing it by single digits. If you press up and down, it'll move it'll skip values. Right now it's jumping by tens. That doesn't do that all the time. So I don't want to say that's what it always does. So let's set the tempo to 120. That's a pretty standard tempo. If you're familiar with music, this is the same thing as beats per minute or BPM. Everything else I think we can leave alone. We will come back and save our song, and I'll walk us through that. The other thing I want to showcase real quick, because it's fun, is the look. So this is how you change the look of the or the palettes. So I'm pressing left and right to change the second value. Up and down changes the font that you have. So I'm going to pick my favorite one, which is cute, and the Kiko font. It's funny, I use dark mode in most things. I actually use this one a lot with my handhelds, but for some reason on the larger screen, I just love this like pastel palette. So if that's too jarring on the stream, let me know and I can change it back. But that's what I want to use for this. So again, this only really applies to the Game Boy Color version. I think with the Game Boy version, you get like inverted and normal version. So we're fine there. We want to navigate back down to song. So we're going to hold select and hit down. And we're back at the song screen. So other buttons, start will play the song. Right now, if you press it, nothing happens because we don't have anything put in yet. It will start playing wherever you have the cursor. That's where it will start, and then it will play down from there. On this screen, A does all of the editing. And on most screens, that's what A does. It lets you edit values. So if you go ahead and select pulse 1, put the cursor there, and hit A, it'll put in 0, 0. And that's our first, what's called a chain. I'll explain again that in a little bit more detail in a second here. if you hold A and start pressing left or right, you'll see it'll raise the values again. If you press up and down, it'll change the first digit, whereas left and right changes the second one. And the thing you'll probably quickly notice is when you get past 9, it doesn't go to 10, it goes to 0A. And it goes all the way up to 0F, and then it goes to 10. So LSDj uses values by hexadecimal. So it actually uses 0 through F in a single space to represent 1 through 16. And again, this is so you can put more values in a single digit or a single spot. So you think of this as it's 10, but it's actually like 17 because we had 0A through F. That said, you don't have to think about it as 10. It's more of a representation of what's stored in there, of what notes and everything are in there. The way I think about these values is like, oh yeah, 02 was what I had this melody in, and 03 is what I had this melody in. So it's more meant to just represent what is encased in it. So don't worry about 10 meaning 17 or 0A meaning 10 or anything like that. Just know that LSDj uses hexadecimal, so 0 through F. You can see it down the left side there. It goes 0, 0 to 0F, so 16 values. And it just does that to save space. So go ahead and press A, add 0, 0 on the pulse, and now we can navigate to the right. So if you hold select and hit right, now we are in the chain screen, and it automatically adds 0, 0 here for us. And now what it's doing is adding 0, 0 phrase. So you can see the PHR. That is now a phrase. So we're kind of dealing with an organization system in LSDj. Think of it like a large, medium, small box. The song encapsulates everything. It shows us all the chain values. From there, we go to the medium box, which is a chain, which then has a bunch of phrases in it. You'll see that the phrases is where we actually put notes in. So a chain is a good way and is useful for music in the sense that there's a lot of repetition in music. So if 0, 0 has a melody I like and I want to use it again, I can like pop down here and add 0, 0 again. And then it's not like I'm not filling this area up with a bunch of phrases. So it's just an easier way to organize your music, keep it all organized. For right now, just understand that chain 0, 0 is not the same thing as phrase 0, 0. It's just inside of it. It's just that we're starting at those values for now. TSP stands for transpose. We're not going to use that right now. That's a way to shift the pitch of the entire phrase. I might touch on that a little bit later, depending on time, but for now, we're going to leave that as is. So selecting phrase 0, 0, we're going to hit select and right to, again, navigate to the right. And again, you can see how the cursor is moving in the bottom right here as we move along. So again, if you get lost, if you end up on something you're not sure, just like if you end up here on this screen, you can see in the bottom right, oh, okay, I can just press down and move back over. So let's, again, navigate over to phrase 0, 0. Oh, and I already have notes in here. I'm going to delete those real quick, and I'll tell you about that in a second here. So phrase 0, 0, this is where we actually put the notes in. This is as much as you get here. You don't get any more than beyond F. You only get 16 values to put notes in. So then, if you had more you wanted to write, you would back out to chain, you would write 0, 1, and you would write something new. So we're in phrase 0, 0, and we want to put some notes in. So again, A is the key editor here. I'm just going to check my notes to make sure I'm not jumping ahead too far. Yep. So we're going to add some notes. So if you hit A, it'll add a note. For you, it might add C2. So you should be hearing that now too. If you add a note and hold A, you should be getting sound. So if you aren't getting sound for some reason, when you hold, if you go up to the project screen, so select and over to P, you want pre-listen on. I've had it randomly turned off sometimes. Not sure why that is. You want pre-listen on. So we'll hop back down to phrase. In notes, the first thing you'll see is an actual note. So A through G, sharps, doesn't show flat values. And then you'll see a number next to it, and that's the octave value. So if I hold A and press left or right, you can increment the note and go up from there. And if you press up and down, you can go up and down octaves. So an octave is the same note, but just higher up, or lower down, or just down. So if you press up and down, you can go up and down through the octaves. I don't think it goes lower than 2. So that's how you adjust note values. Pretty simple to edit those. So at this point, you might be saying, okay, Rob, but I don't know music theory. I don't know what notes to put in. We're going to keep it super simple today. We're going to use a key signature. And a key signature, again, is just a collection of notes. It's a collection of notes that sound good based on some music rules, some music theory. And the one we're going to use is C major. So C major is, if you think of a piano, it's all of the white notes starting with C. So no sharps, which are the black keys. No sharps. It sounds pretty happy. It's a great key to start on, and it keeps it simple for the sake of writing. If you progress forward and you still don't know key signatures, you can just look them up online. There's major, there's minor, A again through G. But if you look them up online, you'll see the values. There is like a practice for how to figure out a key signature, and people, memorize them and know how to recognize them when they see notation. But just look them up online, or otherwise, just experiment. I imagine a lot of you have a developed ear based on the music you like to listen to. So as you put notes in, you'll say, oh, this doesn't sound too good. And you'll be able to recognize what works and what doesn't. But, like I said, otherwise, just look up a key signature, write those notes down, and then just use those notes. That's initially how I started way, way back in the day. But again, for today, we're going to be using C major. So any note, as long as it doesn't have a sharp next to it. So that's a sharp, looks like a hashtag. So let's start with putting in C. Let's start with C3. So I'm going to go up an octave. Again, I'm going to hold A and press up. So that's pretty good. And then I'm going to hop down to 4 here. So if you see along the left, we have the values. These are where we can put notes. If you do know a little bit of music, these are basically 16th note values. So 0, 4, 8, and C would be quarter note values. If you've ever heard of that before, that's where they would land. If you haven't, no big deal. You can put them wherever you want. But I'm going to put 1 at 0, and then at 4, I'm going to press A again. And what it does is it puts the last note in that you used. But I'm going to put this up to E3. So there's E3. I'm going to go to 8. I'm going to put in G. And then I'm going to go to C, and I'm going to go back down to E. So C, E, G, E. Pretty standard little melody here. And again, I was using left and right to edit those values. Up and down changes the octaves, but I'm staying at 3. The higher octaves in LSDj get pretty piercing. I won't do that to you right now. You might have already accidentally done it. But just sticking with this simple melody. So at this point, if we want to hear it, we just press start. And you'll see it'll just keep repeating. And the reason it repeats is because we're just in this phrase. It's not going to play, when you're in a phrase, it's not going to play the entire song. It's not going to play to the next part you've written. It's just going to play what's on the screen. There is a way around that, and I'll mention that a little bit later as we start to add more stuff. So we have C, E, G here. It sounds okay. It doesn't sound too bad. And it's playing. but we want to change, let's say we want to change the sound a little bit. We want to make the sound a little bit more interesting. So you probably notice that we have the note column here. Next to it, we have the instrument column. So you can create different instruments and assign those to an individual note. You actually have to assign an instrument to individual notes. What's cool about that is that within one phrase, you can have a ton of different sounds. It doesn't have to be per instrument, which is kind of how it usually is in a lot of other music programs. This is kind of like a per note value. So right now we're on instrument 00. It's the default sound. So go ahead and highlight 00 and hold select and press right, because you can see we're going to go to instrument, which is in the bottom right, the I screen. So this is the instrument 00 for what we're currently playing. I already gave it a name, so if that's blank, you can just select the name, hit A, and input a name. And I used PLS Pulse 1 just to know. And that shows up in certain spots. It helps you remember if you have a really cool sound you like, you can give it a name. Type is usually populated already with the appropriate channel. So we are in a pulse channel. If you remember going all the way back to song, you can see we're in pulse. So it usually populates with the correct one, but it's always good to know. So the only things we're going to really worry about on this screen are the ADSR, the wave, and then we'll talk about the table in a bit here. These other values are useful things, but they're a little bit more advanced. They're probably a little bit over this workshop's, or a little beyond this workshop's scope. So again, I just want to focus on ADSR and wave. So starting with ADSR, this is one of the little more complex things, but it's helpful to understand at the beginning. And this was changed, not recently, but for me, because I updated. ADSR stands for attack, decay, sustain, and release. We actually only have 3 values here that we can edit. I don't think it really affects release, so we're only really worrying about attack, decay, and sustain. So I want to go through this quick, but it is a little complex, so I definitely recommend referring to the manual, the PDF on the LSDj website for this. It explains it with some great visuals. But what you want to know for this is attack is how fast a note starts. So if attack is, right now it's set to A0, and that's what it sounds like. If we want to edit the first value, the A value, that's actually the volume of the attack. So we hold A and press up and down. It's the same thing as before. So now you see it's a lot quieter. And that's the loudest you can make it. It's from 0 to F again. So that's one way to adjust the volume of your notes. Now, here's where things get a little tricky. The second value, what's currently 0, this is the time it takes the note to play. I think that's the correct explanation. Right now it's set to 0, so it means the note's just constant. You can hear it. It's just constantly playing. The note doesn't kind of trail off. If we set that to 1, and again, I'm going to hold A and press right here. This new value showed up. Don't worry about that right now. But now that we're at 5-1, it's really short. So it's basically adjusting the time of the attack. If we move it up, we're getting different notes. You would call this staccato, I think. And then notes that are held out a little bit longer. So now the second value and the third one affect what happens when you would release a key on a keyboard. So there's a lot of things. Pianos have a sustain pedal, where if you hold this pedal down and you hit a note, it kind of sustains out. You can think that's how these values are working. So I'll showcase something real quick here. If we turn the volume down on this first one and then turn it up on this second one, I think this will showcase. Yeah. So it's swelling. It's starting quiet and getting really loud because we have the volume real quiet on the attack, but then we have it louder on the decay. So it's swelling up it's starting quiet, but then getting louder to match what we have that value at. Kind of complicated stuff, but pretty standard in synthesis If you ever worked with synthesizers, this is pretty standard stuff. So for what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to set these two to 0, 0, so they're not affecting anything. I'm going to keep this one basic. Let's set it at, I kind of liked A for a volume, but I like how it rings off. So I'm going to set it to A. So let's set it to A4. So that means the volume's at A. It's not the loudest it's going to be. And then it's kind of ringing out, which is the 4 value. Remember the zero value lets it ring out indefinitely. Then starting at 1, it's kind of short. But let's put it at A4. Complicated stuff. If you didn't get that, don't worry about it. Just worry about editing the first value for now. LSDj used to only be this first value. It didn't have these other 2 additional ones. And a lot of us got away with just using that. So just worry about that for now. As you develop more songs, look over the manual. You can use those other values to do some pretty cool stuff. So the wave is probably the easiest way to get some cool sounds right out of the box. So if we hit start, and then hold A and press left and right, it's changing what's called the duty cycle of the wave. And it's visually represented here by a wave. These are also percentage values. I think it's 12.5, 25 point something, 50, and then 75. It's just moving the shape of the wave. But it's useful to know, and I actually use this a lot. I use this value for bass sounds. It's a little bassier, a little almost rounder sound compared to like this one. So that's all you really want to know about that, and we'll play with that a little bit more in a bit here. And then tables, I'll talk a bit about. Those are ways to do really crazy things. Yeah, I'll touch on those in a bit. So A4 for this. I'm going to set it to this sound. Yeah, I like that one. So a little bit more of an interesting sound there. And let's leave that at that. So let's hop back to song. So I'm going to hold select, press left. And here's something to know too. If you accidentally on this screen hold select and hit left again, you can see I just switched to live mode. If you look in the upper left-hand corner or back or down in legend where it says L, live mode is used for musicians who use LSDj Live, and you kind of trigger sounds one at a time. We want to stay in song mode, so if you accidentally do this, just hold select and hit left again, and it just toggles back and forth. If you're in live mode and you hit start, it won't play everything all at once, whereas song mode will play everything that's in the same row all at once, which is nice. So we've added a nice little pulse melody. Again, if there's any questions, pop them in the chat. Let me know. I'm happy to revisit something quickly. But I am going to move on to the next little section here. Let me just double check my notes. Okay. So what we want to do here is we're going to go over to noise and we're going to make a little bit of percussion. So if you press A, it should, for you, it should go to 0, 1, but I've been messing around in here before the workshop. And that's because LSDj looks at the next blank value and just gives you that one. But when you're in song, you do want different values for different parts. So you do want, you wouldn't want 0, 0 in pulse and 0, 0 in noise because it's going to look at the same thing. It's still going to look at all these chains. So we're writing a new section. So we want 0, 1. Going to hold select, hit right, add a new phrase. And a quick way to add a new phrase is just to double tap A, and it'll add a new one. And that said, and you're probably wondering this, I could have touched on this a bit earlier. If you make a mistake, there is no undo, unfortunately. But to delete something, you hold B and then hit A. You'll see that B is kind of this modifier button. It has a lot of purposes, but they're all kind of different. So again, if you add something you don't want, or if you're like, oh, this isn't, I don't need this here, just hold B, hit A, and it'll delete. That works on any screen. And then B also cancels out of some screens. So let's add a new phrase. Let's see. So we don't want to use phrase 00 because that belongs to the melody, and you can always check too. So let's see what 01 is. 01 has nothing in it. So that's something I always do. I make sure I'm not reusing something. I'm not writing over something. So again, we're in noise 01, phrase 01, and let's add some percussion. So if you go ahead and add a new note, it sounds horrible because the default in noise is bad. It's just a white noise simulator, like I mentioned. So yeah, that's bad. But we can do cool things with it. So the first thing I want to do is create what's like a hi-hat sound. Hi-hats are part of a drum set. It's what a drummer usually uses to keep tempo with. So I want kind of like a little what's called like an eighth note hi-hat here to kind of keep the tempo. So C2 is a good place to start. Let's use instrument 01 because we haven't used that anywhere. So highlight that and hold select and hit right to go over to instrument. And you can see it already has noise filled in. I'm going to name it HH for hi-hat, so I remember that. And we have a few less values here, and that's fine. For ADSR, again, we're just going to use the first value. We're just going to use attack for the simplicity of this workshop. It's a little loud right now. Yeah, so I'm going to turn it down. So again, I'm pressing up and down to edit this first value, which is the volume, the amplitude. Still kind of loud. I like that. It's also too long. Remember how I said 0 plays out a note indefinitely? Let's put it at 1. So that's pretty short. Kind of like that. So I'm using value 4.2, which is a low volume at 4, and then duration of the note at 2. Not a bad sound, but I think we can change it. So one of the cool things and I'm just stopping and starting by pressing start to play the song again. I believe I've mentioned that. Sorry if I haven't. Any screen you're on, you can hit start. But again, it just plays what you're currently looking at. In noise, there's a section called shape, and this is where we can do some pretty cool things with noise. So I'm going to hop back to the phrase. I'm going to put it in every other value. So I'm just moving down and pressing A. There you go. So every other value, I put in this note. And that's kind of what I want. So I'm going to again select my instrument because I want to edit that. I think I might make it a little bit shorter. Yeah, I kind of like that. Maybe just a bit louder. We can always come back and adjust this. But the cool thing about noise is the shape value affects it in really cool ways. And I'll showcase this right now. You've probably heard these sounds before, right? Footsteps in video games. And now these values, to be completely honest, I don't know what each of these values represent. They do represent something for the shape, but I usually just like mess around and find something I like. From experience from doing this a lot and from my notes, I know that I want to use for this one something up in the E section. Yeah, it has a little bit of a higher sound. I kind of like that. So again, I'm at 5.1 for the attack. I'm at FE for the shape, which is changing the shape of the sound. And that sounds pretty good. That sounds pretty good for a hi-hat sound. The next thing I want to make is a snare drum. So again, this is all helping with tempo. This is all keeping rhythm. Now, typically, snare drums land on beats 2 and 4 in like your standard pop song. So that's what I'm going to do. And that would be at the 4 and the C value. So why don't we delete these out? Because we can't have 2 notes playing in one spot. So we're going to delete these hi-hat notes. So again, I'm going to hold B and hit A. And I'm going to do it down here too. So that was at C and that was at 4. And then we're going to create a new instrument. Let's make this one C3. We'll make it instrument 2. And you can see it defaults back to the original sound. So I'll put that one here too, so I can hear it when I'm pre-listening to it. So go ahead and select instrument 2, hold select and press right. Here's my little joke for snare drum. I just always do this little picture because it's there. And snare drums again are kind of similar, that they're quick attack, pretty loud, and have a pretty distinct sound or shape to them. So it's too long. So I want to change that 0 to maybe a 1, maybe even a 2. Actually, maybe a 1. 1's fine. I might make it a little bit louder, just because it's a snare. I want it to be loud. Now the shape's where it gets fun. I said, this was, I think I had the hi-hat at FE. I'm going to knock this one down. What do I have in my notes? All right, I have it already down to DC. So let's see how that sounds. Yeah. Great snare sound. And you can see we're getting into like explosion sounds, right? That's how GameBoy did explosions, with a lot with the sound channel. But I like that. I might turn it down just a bit. Yeah, I think that's good. So again, all I did was change the shape. I adjusted the volume, and then I changed the shape. For percussion instruments, they typically have a short decay. They just kind of happen and then end. They tend not to hold out, but it's really up to you. Some people make really crazy digital percussion sounds. So there's our percussion. So cool. Like we have the melody, we have the percussion. Let's say from this screen, I press start, I only hear this. Let's say we want to hear everything. If you hold select and hit start, you hear everything all at once. Pretty neat. Now, the one thing that's happening here, my melody. So remember when I made this other change just to show what was happening? My melody is only on 0, 0. And I went back to my pulse and went to 0, 0. And then 0, 1, I just had an empty, was it 0? Oh, there was stuff here, but I guess I can delete that. When it played everything, it does play everything that's available to it. So because there's something there that isn't working or not correct, it's still playing that. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that. And now it should continuously play everything. And again, I'm just holding select, hitting start to play everything. And you can see there's little arrows to indicate which parts it's playing. So pretty basic, pretty simple. I'm adjusting volumes as we go along. Typically in my workflow, I'll go back and adjust them later to kind of make sure everything sounds good together. Cool. So let's create a wave. I want to be mindful of time here. Not go too over with this. So we're going to create a basic bass sound. So go ahead and highlight wave. I'm going to double tap A. Jumping up. So I jumped in here before and I was messing around, and that's why it's giving me high values. There we go. You can pick any one you want as long as it's empty. So here I think I'm just going to keep it pretty basic as far as like a bass goes. I'm just going to use C because that's our key that we're in. And you can see with wave, it does go a little bit lower. So I'm going to turn this up to C2, pressing up there. It already gave me a new instrument. That's nice. Now maybe something I'm not used to. I don't know if it does that in my older version. But so we have a new instrument here. Make sure you just have a new one if you select this. Again, we're in the wave channel. Hold select, press right, and we go to edit this. The bass I do want to be pretty like steady. I don't want it to ring out like the melody. I just want it to be steady. And it's kind of that way right now. This is the default sound. Let's hear it all together. It's not bad, but let's mess with it a little bit. Let's make it a little bit more interesting. So this is the wave instrument, and you can see it's pretty complex. There's a lot going on here. not going to worry about too much of this right now. Just know that this is one half of the instrument for a wave. If you are on wave, and then you highlight synth. So each wave instrument has a synth attached to it, and that also affects the sound of it. So you want to highlight synth, hold select and press up, and now there's this whole other section of stuff you can edit. And this is why the wave is complex, but also you get really, really wild sounds with it. You can even, if you hold select from this screen and press right, you can draw in the wave form. I tend not to do that. Some people do, which is totally cool. I tend to just edit these values. So again, this is a little advanced because you have to go up and to the right and look at everything here. But back down on the instrument wave channel, you can see we have volume, we have left and right for panning. One thing I should mention is GameBoy does support stereo, which is really cool. It's one of the best features of it. So you can do some pretty cool stereo stuff. But right now we want to make sure it's on manual. I'm going to highlight synth, hold select and press up, and I'm going to change the signal to square wave. So square wave looks just like a square wave. And it's a different sound. If you ever notice that it takes a second for the sound to update, it's because it hasn't gotten back to the note. It hasn't circled back around to play the note. So when you make changes, wait a second or two for it to cycle back through the note. Yeah, I think I'm going to stick with square for now. So I'm going to go back down. Let's hear it all together. Select and start. Not bad, but a little repetitive. So let's change the bass up a bit. I'm going to go back to my chain. I'm going to add another chain for the bass. So we have 06, which is empty. What's cool now is now that we have a phrase before this one I'm in, if I keep pressing up, it goes back to that one. So now you can press up and hold down, and it goes to the next phrase. You can see in the upper left-hand corner, it goes from 5 to 6. And then on the right, it shows the which chain value we're in. So you can see chain value 0, 1 here. So let's make this, let's start on C, then let's go up to F. See how that sounds all together. So now it'll play 2 of these. So now you can start to see how we construct a song. I'm going to add another one. We'll go up to G. I'm going to add one more. Let's go down to D. Let's hear that all together. Cool. So pretty basic song coming together. And again, if you want to hear everything, you can always come back to the song screen and just hit start and it'll play everything. But if you're in one of those individual screens, you can hold select and hit start. Any questions so far? Well, I take a quick sip of tea. Definitely let me know. I know I've thrown quite a bit learning a new program like this, but it's pretty fun once you get into it. It's pretty intuitive. It's nice because the button combinations become muscle memory, and it's pretty easy and quick to move along in. So one thing that's missing right now, actually first, let me take a step back. Let's save our work. So I mentioned the project screen. So we're going to hold select, press up, navigate to P for project. So you can load and save songs here. Just highlight load save song, press A, and you see you have some options here. You can erase, save, or load. So we want to select save. When it's your first time starting a new song, it'll always say empty. Select that. I'm going to name this, I don't know, RGD1. Oops. 0's fine. Hit OK. And it saves. All good. You always want to do that before you shut the game off, before you turn your Game Boy off or anything. And then you can have multiple songs in here. At the bottom, it shows you the memory available, blocks. So it shows you how many you can save. I forgot the exact number. It depends on the size of the songs and everything. Excuse me. Then to go back, you just hit B, and you back out of that. And yeah, that's how you load and save songs. Another thing I'll mention while we're here is the help section. Super, super handy. I reference it all the time. It tells you about the screens. It tells you about copy and pasting. We won't jump into that too much today, but you can see you hold select and hit B, and you kind of start to begin to highlight things, and then you can copy and paste, muting and panning and all these other things. Great screen to reference. Great screen that I always come back to just to remember things. But if you ever have issues, you're like, how does that thing work again? You can always hop to the help section. And again, I'm just hitting A, hitting B to back out. So let's go back to our song. Pretty good. But it's missing one crucial thing, or something I think crucial, and that's a kick drum. A kick drum is also known as the bass drum. It kind of provides the helps provide the rhythm. Typically, you want, I don't want to say typically, but in a song like this, I would want at least a kick drum and a snare. The hi-hat isn't as crucial, but the kick drum is. So one trick is to add this on a pulse channel. So let's use this empty pulse channel we have right now. Double tap A, get a new chain. It doesn't matter which value it is. Double tap A, get a new phrase. And here we're going to use our first command. So you probably noticed all the way to the right is a column, and this is called command. Commands are essentially effects for the notes. So let's write in, and I have this all written down. Let's put a C4 in. And it already gave us a new instrument. That's great. Let's name this instrument. I always name it kick, so I remember, and so I don't use it for the wrong thing. Okay. There's multiple ways to get the commands. You can attach them here on a per note value. So if you put a command right here, it only affects this note. It won't affect any of the notes that follow after it. So there's two parts to a command. There's the command type, which is represented by a letter, and then there's the value after that. The values affect the commands differently. So it's not like, okay, a 10 for this command is the same thing for a 10 for this command. It's kind of per command basis. Again, if you ever need help remembering what commands do, it's in the help section. You go to command list. Here's what they all do. Here's what they all mean. We're going to use the pitch bend command. And it does just that. It bends the pitch in a really, really cool and interesting way. So I want to make a kick drum, which is a low sound, but it has to kind of like dip low. So it has to kind of like start and then go down and then stop and kind of be quick. So right now this sounds like it's just a high note, right? So if we put P in for pitch, and let's put it at 2 just to showcase what it does. So pitch bend, right? And it can do some wild things. If you increment this, I mean, right? it's insanity. But we want to actually go down. So I'm going to push it down like this. And you see the note drops. The problem is that it drops too fast there. And we're going to have other notes here. And I don't want, this obviously won't affect them, but I want this to play out differently. So we're going to use commands in a different way. So go ahead and delete that. Hold B and hit A. Let's hop into instruments. And I had pointed out the tables before. So tables are a cool way to use commands in a much, much more granular way. So go ahead and select table. Hold A and hit right. And it'll input the first table, which is 0, 0. So you probably noticed we haven't gone all the way over to T in the legend. So if you hold select and hit right here, we're now on a table. And we're kind of tiptoeing into a little bit of advanced stuff here. And I'm hoping to not go over too much over time. Probably wrap this up in about 10 more minutes. Noah, feel free to let me know how things are going on that end. But I want to touch a little bit on tables. So we have a couple things here. We have volume, which is pretty self-explanatory. You can adjust volume here. We have transpose, as I mentioned before. So you can change the pitch of this singular note right here a multitude of times. And then we have two command options. So instead of only having one here, if we look at the table, we have two options plus the volume and transpose. Now there's all these 16 values, and the way to think of this table is when this note plays, when this C4 plays, it just like rips through this whole table real quick. If you're familiar with games, think of it as this is running the frames per second, right? When a game runs all the code per frame, this is the same thing. It's running this whole table per that one note. So we're gonna do a cool little trick with the pitch to make it sound like a kick drum. So the first thing, let's go back to the instrument screen. Let's adjust the volume. Let's make this, what do I have here? Let's turn it up to F. So we're gonna crank it and we're gonna make it short. So it should sound like that right now. And we want it bassy, so I'm gonna change the wave to 50%. It's a little bit more bassy, a little bit rounder of a sound. And that's good for this screen. Let's hop back over to the table for this instrument. And we're gonna use the pitch command again. So I'm gonna go over to command, select P, and again, you can left and right to adjust these. We're gonna select P, and we're gonna change this to value, what do I have here? DF. Now, obviously I'm referencing my notes, and you might say, well, Rob, what if I don't have your notes, what do I do? And here's the thing. When trying to figure out these sounds, I write a lot of them down. I take pictures. There's unfortunately no way to kind of save sound presets and kind of like move them around between songs. So I just write things down. There's actually what's called a patch book out there. It's a PDF of just these screens and like, punk rock bass guitar. And it's just like, here's what the values you put in. So if you're lost for sounds, look that up. A lot of chiptune musicians are also open to sharing their files, so you can see how they make their certain sounds. I'll happily send you my files, so you can see how I get my sounds. This is just one I've done so many times that like I remember it and I have notes for it. I'm like, oh, that kick drum sound, here's the values for it. So it's just one of those things you kind of have to write down and keep track of. So right now I added a pitch and it's going to go down. So you can hear it starting to sound more like a kick drum. I'll put it back up to see. So there it's going up. Here it's going down. And when we get down to D, F, you can hear it sounding like a kick drum. And this might be coming over Twitch, it might not, but there's kind of a high chirp at the end. Like a high, really high pitched frequency sound. I want to cut that out. Because what it's doing is it's playing through this whole thing on the note, but it's playing through it all. So what I want to do is I want to stop it playing through this table to cut off that little high-pitched tail. So there's actually a command called the kill command, and the letter is K. So what it will do here is it will play through this table, but then when it gets to K, it'll stop. So here's how it sounds now. It's a pretty good kick sound, pretty bassy for a pulse channel. So again, that's it. I did a pulse drop down using DF, and then I cut it off short to get rid of that tail. And here's how the whole thing sounds. Let's make it a little bit more interesting. Let's put 2 kicks here. And then I'm going to put like 2 quick ones here. So that's sounding great. I might just turn it down a bit. So there you go. That's a simple kick sound using a table, a lot of effects. And that is a simple loop in its entirety. So again, you know, we did multiple phrases for the bass. So we have a little bass progression. We did a really basic hi-hat and snare sound. And our little kick drum that we just did, and then our original melody. And so you could always come in here, write something new. Oops. So there's a common mistake, right? I'm like, oh, okay, phrase 01. Oh, I've already used that. So I usually just delete that and double tap A, and it gives you a blank one. So let's do G, A. Oops, I went down. And let's do something wild. Let's like fly up the scale. And come back down. So let's hear how that sounds, just for fun. There's something. And that's kind of the workflow of LSDj. Time check. I'm probably over an hour. Okay. Okay. So I might take 10 more minutes, and I'll keep track so I don't go over. I really want to showcase a few of the advanced things just to show you what it's capable of, and a few of the cool things that LSDj can do. But this is a simple loop. That's kind of the workflow. That's how it moves on. From here, I'll be doing some basically some things that I like to utilize. So let's jump into it. Okay, I'm gonna make a new, and I won't be like talking about button combinations and that. I'm just gonna kind of work how my workflow goes. I'm gonna make a new chain. Let's use the one I did before. So one button combination is you hold, I just said I wouldn't do this, but I'm going to anyway. You hold select and hit B and A right after one another, and it makes a copy of that one, but with a different phrase value. So it's a good way to make a new copy of something. So you can use the same values, but it's a different phrase, so I'm not editing the other one. And now I'm going to make a new instrument the same way. I'm going to change these to 5. You can see the name shows up, so it's good to know, like, oh, okay, this is why you title them. Oh, this is, okay. So 6 I haven't used, right? Let's just use 7. Okay, so here's one of my favorite sounds that I use all the time. So I mentioned the wave sound, right? We can change it here, but you can also change it through the table. So there is a command called W, and it changes the wave duty. So this is one of my favorite things. So I'm going to put it on quarter note values here. I'm going to start changing these. Like already 10 times more interesting sound. Because it's just tearing through that real quick. You can also do something like this. I like to sometimes just scrunch them all up here. See what this does. And you can see it's only affecting the very beginning of each note. But let's use that kill command that I used before so it stops right after. Let's see how that sounds. Too short. So I'm going to use another command here called hop. Hop is neat. It gets to that point where the command is and it hops back to the beginning. So it's a good way to cycle through something, just a few things, instead of going through the whole thing. Little fun, little intense. I might actually go back to the way we were before. And this is my process. This is my like, try this, see how it sounds. Cool. I like that. I kind of call that like a spacey synth type sound. Yeah. Way more interesting, way more dynamic, pretty fun. Another thing. So if you do know a bit about music, you know that a chord is something that uses 3 notes. Chords are played on guitar, on piano, everything. Pretty standard thing to use in music. But you probably noticed we only have 3 notes available to us. So you can play chords, but it's not going to sound full because you won't have a bass line, you won't have like any supporting melodies. So one way to get around that is to use a really fast, what's called arpeggio. And it's basically going up and down notes. I think I'm explaining that right. I think I'll showcase it. It'll be a better way to show. So I'm just making new stuff here. Pick C, new value. So again, I'm going to make a table. Tables, I use them a ton. I'm going to make this one short. Again, just quarter notes. Make a new table. So I mentioned the transpose option. So since each note is tearing through this whole table, if we use transpose, we can get multiple notes in the space of one note. So 0, 0 is the root note. If we transpose up to 4, and this is going up steps, this is definitely music theory stuff I'm getting into now. So it's basically building a chord here. That would be what? The 3rd. And then if I go up to 7, that's the 5th. And if I go up to C, that's up an octave. I've just memorized it over time that 0C is all the way up an octave. If you were to just count piano notes, if you were to start at your root note, count up to 4, that would be the 3rd. So I'm adding equal values of these, and you get a sound like this. It's basically a chord, but in an art form, just happening real quick. Real common sound, used all the time. Yep, in a constant. People use those. I use them a lot for like kind of background sound, just to kind of fill out the song. That's one way people kind of like fill out the sound when you can't actually write a chord per se. Cool. And then the last thing I want to show, is my favorite thing about the wave channel. So let's make a new wave section. What do I want? I think probably let's start there. Okay, so again, I have notes for this, so I'm just going to plug it in, but I'll try and explain it as I go along. So I think I'll leave everything here. So the wave we've been using so far on manual, and it plays pretty steady. But there's other options for this. There is once, which means it plays through the wave shape just once and then stops. There is a loop, which means it plays to the end and then starts back at the beginning. And then there's ping pong, which means it plays to the end and then it goes backwards. And that's what we want to use. It's a fun sound. Speed, we're gonna set this at 6. That's how fast it plays through this shape. And length we'll leave at F. So then we're going to select synth. I'm going to change this to 1 because we already used 0. I'm going to hold select and hit up. And here's where we have some fun. So let's leave this there. Phrase we're going to set to resync. There's resync 2. I don't know what this does. I just know that it makes it sound the way it does. So that's when I tend to use it. And then we're going to adjust all these values. I'm just going to plug these in for the sake of time. I'm going to set this one to 79, a Q value up to 6, cutoff, I'm going to drop down to 38, V shift stays there at a limit, and then phase stays at 6. And this is adjusting the two values of the wave. You can see it's kind of split in 2. So, this half of the volume, all these values is affecting each individual side. So you can kind of affect these individual these two parts of the wave independent of each other, which is kind of fun. So again, a lot of this just came through experimentation of getting a sound and then messing with it, liking it, and then, changing it a few weeks later. F and then 18. So this should be pretty wild. Oh, it's so good. So there's there's the part in the game where you go to, I don't know, hell or something. What a wonderful sound. Little loud. So you can turn it down here with this volume. I find it too drastic. Actually, that's not too bad. But again, I have it set to ping pong. So what it does here is it gets to the end and then it goes back again through it. If you put it to manual, it won't be nearly as dynamic. Pretty steady, right? Loop's pretty good, but I find ping pong the best. Great sound for really aggressive bass type sounds. I use it all the time, but it just shows you the possibilities with the wave channel. You can see the wave is insane looking here. You can almost kind of get vocal sounds sometimes too. So that's something I use all the time. I mean, that's such a cool sound. Really, really cool stuff. Again, showing you the possibilities with wave, how really, really intense of a sound it can get. Really cool stuff done with the waves. Some people make their kick drums on wave and they sound incredible. So definitely recommend checking that out. Yeah, I think I'll stop there. The one thing I'll say is if you found this helpful, I also did 2 videos on YouTube. If you look up Exploring Audio, I was a commentator on one of them, then I actually tore down one of my songs on screen. I walk through my song, I show you exactly what I do, how I do it. It might be useful to some people more so than this workshop was, because you get to hear the sound and you can see how it works. But hopefully you get a good sense of LSDj and how it works. Again, hop in, mess around. It's a lot of fun. It's super fun way to get cool sounds. And again, reach out to any artists you like. A lot of them will happily share their files so you can check out their sounds and stuff. But I think that is it for me. Happy to answer any questions if anybody has those. Otherwise, reach out if you want any more info. And yeah, thanks again, Sam and Noah. Cool.
All right. Yeah, we have a question from Sam on the stream. How long do you normally work on a song / piece for, coming back and picking it apart, changing it up, etc.?
Yeah, so it's funny. One thing you'll notice on the project screen is at the bottom, it shows you how long you've been working on a song, work time and total time, which I'll forget about until I see it. It depends on the song. If it's pretty repetitive, once you get a part in, you can kind of select copy, and then I can just paste it in, and I just have a song put together. If I'm trying to be pretty experimental, make some crazy stuff, I'll spend a lot more time on it, upwards of 8 to 10 hours. If it's pretty cut and dry, just loops, maybe 3 parts, 2 to 3 hours maybe. The thing that takes me the longest is usually remembering oh, I have that sound I really like, and then go finding out an old song and plugging it in, and going from there. And then a follow-up pass is usually an hour where I just listen to it in entirety, make some minor edits, or plug it in. Sometimes I plug it in with other instruments like guitar and drums and stuff. Cool, good question. Awesome. Any others? Awesome. Well, thanks for everybody who attended and checked it out. I will probably be releasing some new music somewhat soon. And yeah, keep in touch if you have any questions. Otherwise, thanks everybody for being here.
There's just one more from the chat. Can we see your tea mug?
Oh, my tea mug.
Casey Wiederman.
Made in Poland.
Here, let me give that full screen.
Get that full screen.
There you go.
Stream. Yeah, big tea mug. It's kind of cold right now. I forgot to put it back on my mug warmer. Such a rookie mistake. Awesome. Well, thanks everybody. It's a lot of fun.